Welcome to the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm Simona Nicole, host of the show, mindset coach, and motivational speaker. I've made it my mission to help you get unstuck, shift your mindset, and understand your worth to help you live your most purposeful life. Each week, I will bring you an idea, guest, or a positive thought that will leave you inspired and empowered to win your life. We decide the stories we tell ourselves and where we invest our energy. I'm so grateful you popped in. Now let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. I'm really stoked that you're here this week. We have such a fiery episode for you. We have such an incredible guest, and she's going to drop so much insight. So literally just prepare yourself. We are going full in today. Her name is Jewel Hohman, and welcome to the show, Jewel. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. What an intro.
Oh, thanks.
What? I'm so excited.
I am too, and I would love if you could just let our audience know a little bit about who you are, what you do, and the journey that sort of brought you here.
Yes. So I am a mindset coach, but I use brain-based coaching. So I teach people about their brains as we go through the process. I feel like it kind of helps them point out their thinking habits. It kind of helps them recognize their behaviors. If they understand that what's going on in their brain when those things happen. So I work with people from all over the board, all different issues, but it always kind of boils down to them following through and self-discipline and then emotional resilience. So those are kind of my wheelhouses.
I love that. Self-discipline is such a good one. Okay, I don't know where to start because there's so many good places that we can go. Okay, let's dive in full force. And I just want to go straight into, okay, what is the key to self-discipline? And especially for someone who might continuously and constantly be trying to have that change in their life, but they can't do it. And they just can't make that accountability to themselves.
Yes. So oftentimes, everything we do is based off of our emotions, right? We love to believe that we are logical and rational all the time, and we are totally not. So everything we do is based off of emotion. So if you're feeling apathetic and you are having a hard time following through with something that you planned, or just following through with any general plan that you have, specific or not, it's because you subconsciously are thinking that it's not going to matter anyway. Most likely, there would be a question of what's the point? But the problem is those thoughts and that mindset creates how we feel in our bodies. So oftentimes, I would say for somebody that is having a hard time following through and being self-disciplined, I would just start getting curious about what your emotions are before you do the things, before you want to do the things that you want to follow through on. Because those emotions are gonna be the key. You can then be okay, what am I feeling? And why am I feeling this way? What am I thinking about? Yeah. So, wow, I just jumped in full force so fast.
I know, literally. I'm sitting here. I'm wow, we really just dove in straight away. I love that so much. Okay, I want to touch back on it a little bit. And so maybe we can just build a little bit of context around all of that, because so you're a mindset coach and you do this by merging, the brain and the science and all of that, and helping people to learn more about their brain as they're learning about their mindset. So how do you merge the two of them together in your coaching business? And where did the idea come from of merging both of them together?
Yeah, I honestly don't even know where the idea came from. It just made sense. I at first just called myself a life coach, and I was just helping anybody who again needed help with emotions in their mindset. And then I realized that I talked a lot about the brain when I was coaching people. So then it just made sense. I know a lot about the brain. I wouldn't say I'm an expert or a neuroscientist by any means, but that was helpful for me in my own self-coaching, to understand what was going on. So they kind of merge in such a beautiful way, because when you're coaching somebody, you're coaching them to feel different and to have different behaviors. So if you understand your brain around the behaviors that you have and the emotions that you have now, it's a lot easier to stop shaming yourself for not, again, like showing up or following through or for feeling bad. Like if you just understand that like you're human and like how your brain got here and like what it's wired to do, there's less shame around all of that.
That's really, really interesting. So if you think about how your brain is like just set up to work to begin with, what does that look like? Like, what is your brain? How is your brain set up to begin with?
Yes. So your brain is set up to, it's designed to look for reasons to be scared and to be doubtful. And I know this sounds like, what? Like, why would it want to do that? But it's because in the past, like we had to notice danger in order to survive. So danger could have been like any sort of like small risk or fear, or even like being separated from our group at one point meant like possible death. So like if somebody fears like the judgment of others, it's because their brain associates that rejection as like, dude, you might die. Like you might not live through this. This could be horrible. So it's wired to look at things that way, and it's almost wired, I guess one could say, to be negative.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that's like the basis of all of it. It's wired for fear and doubt, to look for the bad stuff, and it does it to protect you. I think a lot of times when I talk about the brain, or like when everybody has these conversations, they're like, okay, yes, I get it, but I don't want to feel that way anymore. Like we have to have some appreciation for that, because the reason why we're all still here is because of those primitive thinking patterns.
That's so true. That's such a good point. I was just thinking to myself, because like I don't know if you've ever like, you know, sort of researched or looked into like, you know, your generational healing and things that have happened in the past, and how when you heal yourself, you're actually healing like 5 years or 5 generations back and like 8 forwards or something like that. Those stats are probably completely wrong, by the way, so do not quote me on those. But so, you know, when you're doing that, it just makes so much sense, because if the fear that's been so built into our brain is something that's come from all those years ago, of course it would still be a thing that's present today, because that's like something that was so strong back then. But then, like you're saying, you have this like moment and this opportunity when you have that realization, like, wait, no, I don't want to feel like that anymore, and I don't want this to continue anymore. So that's the part where people kind of like realize that they can change. And so when people come to you and are like, okay, I don't want to feel like this anymore, what's like one of like the first things that you do or help your clients with in terms of taking the realization and like maybe putting like 1 or 2 action steps towards how they can start to shift?
Yeah, totally. So everybody, again, like wants to change things. Like they don't want to think that way anymore. They might have a little bit more empathy or compassion for themselves, but especially if somebody fears, like I said earlier, rejection or judgment of others, or if they have like a limiting money belief, whatever it is, they see it and they immediately don't want to think about that way or think that way anymore. But I cannot stress this enough. And I know like if past me was listening to this podcast, like she might roll her eyes. So if you're rolling your eyes, I hear you. But it's so true. It's so essential that we just practice becoming aware and like being curious of what we're thinking, why that's happening. Because if we don't have the understanding and, like I said, compassion or awareness that it's happening to begin with, there's no way you can move forward. Because oftentimes somebody will try, like they'll see a thinking pattern that they have or like a behavioral pattern that they have, and they immediately want to change it, right? And by doing that, like you are shaming yourself and almost like pressuring yourself, and that's gonna keep you where you are. That's
So
gonna keep
true.
you, yeah, it's gonna keep you doing the things that you don't want to be doing, feeling the way you don't want to be feeling. It's just gonna like hold onto that longer. Like it's just gonna persist. So I would say And again, past me, if you were listening, I know you're gonna roll your eyes, but really the first step is truly like just being aware of like what your thoughts are, like how you're thinking about like a certain situation. If you notice like you're feeling different or you have a behavior in your life you don't like get curious on like why that is. Um, and start building that compassion with yourself, because through that compassion can you like truly move forward and not just continue to beat on yourself and pressure yourself where you are.
I think that's such an important part, and especially the part that you said about like shaming yourself and all that kind of stuff, because when you get into a place where you want to change all these things, you get so excited, right? You're like excited to like make all this change happen, and then you know it's almost like putting the cart before the horse, essentially, because you're like, okay, I have this thing, I want to change, I'm over it, I don't want to like worry about it anymore, but you know I don't really know how to change it other than like I don't really know how to change it other than, let me try and take a couple of steps. Then we think we have to do like 85,000 things to make that change happen. But I'm loving what you're saying is like building up like that emotional like connection and like awareness. And so having that said, like how could someone start to build up that emotional resiliency that you would need to make this type of change happen?
Yeah. Again, like I would just come from the place of like curiosity and fascination. And just trying to operate from that place as much as possible. So what I tell my people to do in the very beginning, so like their first month is always like about building that awareness so that way you can be emotionally resilient later. So like do what is called like a thought download. I didn't come up with this idea. Brooke Castillo did. She's a master coach. But the thought download is where you just, it's kind of like journaling, but instead you're just like listing the thoughts that you're having. And you just like let it all out and become aware of those thoughts. Like just recognize them. And some of them that really stand out to you, like ask yourself like, okay, this is interesting. Like, why am I thinking this? Why is this one hitting me in the gut more than others? Like, what else do I think about this? Where does this come from? And get curious, because it allows you to, again, like I said, not shame yourself for having those thoughts or those feelings and therefore those behaviors. But it also allows you to, like, whenever something happens in your life, like, because we are all going to go through shit.
Yeah.
We're all gonna go through shit. But then you will know, like, okay, I just need to be curious about this and just realize that, like, I'm a human being having a thought, having an emotion, and stepping into curiosity and not like pressure or like avoidance is going to be so much better. You're going to feel things faster, understand things faster, and move forward through things faster. So
I love that.
did that make sense? Did I articulate that well?
So, I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think it goes into like, okay, I don't know how you feel about this topic, but like, okay, spirituality, can we go there? Can we not? I don't know. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Okay. I never know, because like some people, it's not their thing, but I totally hear what you're saying when you're, it's merging like the science part with the spirituality part in this case. And like what I want to say, it's having that awareness, like a brain-based awareness of the emotion that you're feeling, and like noticing that it's a thought, and then being very aware that that thought is driving the feeling that you're having. But then on the other hand, if you start talking about like manifestation or something like that, for example, they correlate so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, they totally do. I used to not believe in manifestation at all. Like, I'm just gonna be so real. I was like, that is woo-woo stuff. Like, I don't understand. But truly, like, the more I do this work, the more I'm like, okay, I see it now. Because what happens is, like, again, like the way you're thinking, like, contributes to how you feel in your body, and how you feel drives your actions, and therefore like your actions accumulate to your results, right? So like
true.
Truly like thinking about things, visualizing things. I'm not super familiar with everything with manifestation, but the more I talk about it and learn about it, the more I'm like, yeah, like I get it now. Because I used to think it was just, okay, think about things and it'll happen. But really, like, it's just think about like how you can do things, like visualize it. That is so important because, again, like it creates a feeling in you. And from that feeling, like we act. So it really, they do tie together so insanely well. Like it's pretty much the same concepts, they're just like different viewpoints.
Yeah, and different words. Like it's essentially just like different words for like saying the same thing, because what you're saying is so true. Like you're gonna embody like that feeling and like that vibration of what it feels like to have that thing, and you're gonna want it more anyways, right? So you're naturally gonna do the things that are gonna lead you to having that. And so yeah, whether you're looking at it from like a science lens or you're looking at it from a spiritual lens, the ideas are so similar. You know what I mean? The ideas are very similar.
Yeah.
But maybe the words are just a little different.
Yeah, really though. It's crazy.
It is crazy. So, okay, could you like define what emotional resiliency means for our listeners in case they don't know what it means?
Yes. So the way I define it anyway is the ability to like feel anything. And truly, I think this is so important. Like the ability to feel anything. And like you can, because when you, let me break this down. So like when you aren't afraid to like feel devastated or embarrassed or rejected or like and greatly disappointed, like you really aren't afraid of pretty much anything else. Like because it's just an emotion. And again, like going back to like the evolutionary perspective, we're not in danger of getting eaten by tigers or being like separated from society, and like we're not like those things aren't very prevalent for most of us, but we do still have like those emotions tied to those things that were about survival. But again, they're just emotions. When you realize that you can like experience an emotion and it doesn't mean anything about you, it doesn't mean anything about your life, it's just an emotion, it's all you're feeling, like nothing can truly stop you if you're willing to feel.
I love that. That's so true. And I think that it's like, you know, like you're saying, because I think everyone has like their own definition of what this could mean. And I think mine would be very similar to yours. And then also that it's like, you know, like you're saying, like experiencing that emotion and like just being good with it. You know what I mean? Like, what could that have been an embarrassing situation? Yeah, it probably was. I probably did embarrass myself, but like, do I really care? No. You know what I mean? And then you're just kind of like, okay, well, it is what it is. And whatever it was happened, and, you know, you can't take it back now. And so, you know, just living in like the reality of, you know, that nobody is perfect. We all have our own different emotions and do different things that, you know, to some people could be like, you know, devastating. And then to other people it could just be like, well, fuck, just roll along with the punches. You know what I mean? And so I guess it's like, you know, between that point, between those two different types of people, I mean, there are so many different factors as to why one person would have one reaction and then why another person would have another reaction. But do you think that, you know, this has to do with like self-discipline in some sense?
I do. And I love what you said, like the way you phrased it about like living in reality. Because truthfully, what we can do to make ourselves like not so emotionally resilient. And again, like to me, emotional resilience is willingness to feel anything, and being okay with that.
I love that.
So, but we often like in our, and I almost like don't even want to say this because I know I'm going to sound cliche, but it's so true.
I'm here for it. Say it. You are emotionally resilient. You can say whatever you want.
Right. Yeah, that our society with like instant gratification, if I've noticed it myself, like I noticed like I would get in like the smallest tiff with like my partner and I would just get out my phone. And it's because I didn't want to feel that uncomfortableness, right? Like that slight discomfort, it wasn't even an argument, right? Like just a small tiff, and I want to avoid it. So I do think we can get less emotional resilient when we go and we avoid emotions faster. It makes it harder then to deal with any stressors that we have, or any like truly inconvenience or any small discomfort. So I do think
such a good point. That's
right?
such a good point. Especially like, you know, the part about like, you know, if you're going out, okay, if you think of like similar to like your example, like if you think like you're out in public and you're with a group of friends and then they're all like, okay, we're gonna go over here, we'll be right back, and you're standing there and you're like, I'm all by myself, and you're like, I'm gonna take out my phone, I'm gonna look and pretend like I'm talking to somebody and pretend like I'm so busy and like doing all this stuff, because it's like almost like awkward to like stand and like sort of look around and be like, hello, you know what I mean? It's like awkward to like be in people's like space sometimes and be like, wow, like what a great shirt, I don't know, or something weird like that you could say. But you know, like a thing that could be typically seen as like normal, all of a sudden just kind of can become so uncomfortable. But I think that, you know, another piece to like being like, you know, having like that self-discipline or like being like just is like also like knowing that it's like okay to like sit in like the uncomfort of you know, some things. But if we could look at it like, you know, the idea of self-discipline on like a, you know, in a different way, what could self-discipline look like? Like how could you start to build that muscle up, especially if you're trying to do something, trying to change something, but constantly, you know, disappointing yourself because you're not getting to where you want to be?
Yeah. First of all, I gotta say, I love that example. That is seriously such a good example. Like, we don't want to for like 30 seconds, so we're like, no.
Right? And you're like, oh my God, I'm just going through Instagram for like the 18th time today. Like,
right. I don't even care what I'm looking at, but here we
exactly.
But yeah, so, and this is what I jumped into in the very beginning.
Yes.
So, of course. So yeah, I do think it all boils down to, again, like what you were thinking about whatever it is you want to change. So like whether it's like working out, becoming a morning person and actually getting out of bed, that one was mine, or whatever it is, I think it's important to look at what you are thinking about it. Because what you're thinking about, it creates a feeling of like just flat out apathy, and like you're disappointing yourself almost like ahead of time, you know, like because you're probably thinking something like, this isn't going to work, or this is going to be painstaking. Like for example, I worked with an accountant who is very busy normally during this time of year. And he really wanted to like lose weight and keep it off and have a healthy lifestyle. Homie has tried so many things before, and he could never like stay consistent. And it's because and it took some digging to figure this out, by the way. This took a couple sessions of us like digging and just picking his mind around it. But whenever he would come home and it was like time to work out, or time to like cook dinner, wherever it was, he was immediately like washed with like, there's no point to this because I'm just going to be busy. This is going to be painstaking. Like it's going to be inconvenient. It's going to be hard. and like, I don't want to do any of that. And again, like, that's why it's so important to look at what you were thinking about it, because he wasn't walking around knowing that he was thinking that. He might say a couple things to his friends, but like, homie's just out here living his life, being busy, going to work. Like he was not aware. So that awareness.
That's so crazy.
Yeah. And most of us like live that way, and we all have brains and sneaky thoughts. And so that's why it's so important to look at like what you are thinking about it. Are you thinking that you don't deserve this? Are you thinking you're not capable of it? Are you thinking that the process is going to suck? And only then can you, and at that point, actually, before I get ahead of myself, and at that point, once you like are aware of like what you were thinking about whatever it is you want to change, you can't just immediately start thinking, this is going to be fun. This is going to be a blast. I got this. Yeah, your brain's not going to compute it. Your brain's going to be like, dude, what the heck?
So true.
Like, yeah, it's going to be like, I have all this evidence for why the other belief is true. Like, this is crap. So then you start building like a bridge, right? Because you can't just jump from believing that it's going to suck and it's going to be hard and you can't do it, to believing it's going to be great and wonderful and you got it. So like, what are the bridges there? Like, just start with that. So I think a great bridge is like, it's possible. Like, it's possible. And you'll notice too, once you kind of open up like your mind to that kind of thinking, you will then come with like different ideas, like other thoughts will come easier. So again, like I know it can be hard and it can be difficult to even think about what you're thinking and like how you're feeling. I think too, we often attach like our behaviors to who we are. So like if you feel like you're constantly in the scroll hole on like social media or you're Netflixing all the time, that's just you doing something. That's not who you are.
So true.
Yeah. So I think if anyone had needed a bridge, a bridge thought for where they are now to where they want to be, I would play with that one.
I love that. And I think that that's so important to think about for a second too, because it's like, we all do many things. You know what I mean? You can, just a good example that comes to top of mind really quick is, you know, you're someone that works crazy hours and then this coronavirus starts and now you're out of a job. And so the amount of pain that could cause you because you've wrapped up your worth into your job, into what you do, and instead of looking inwards into who you are, that's like a really hard thing to process, especially when, you know, your worth is wrapped into the stuff that you do on a daily basis. And then to no longer have that, you know, you get like this, like you get lost because you don't know, you know, how to fix that. But so how could someone, you know, okay, you start to bridge your thoughts, but then how does someone, you know, actually start to uncover like their worth and like detaching themselves from that thought?
Yeah. And that is such a good question. I think oftentimes, again, like I'm going to keep going back to this. You got to be curious and you got to be aware. I'm a big fan of like the thought downloads, but even journaling, if that feels more your style, but doing something like that where you can actually look at like what you were thinking. Because that only then could you notice that you are identifying yourself with what you do or your worth with how productive you are. I feel like that's so common. I swear like every client I've ever had has had that thought at some point.
It's probably true.
Yeah. So, but again, it becomes to like, you just got to look at what you're thinking about it and even ask yourself, like, if you're having a hard time looking at what you're thinking, like, just start even asking yourself like questions and like answering them, and you'll get even better at asking good questions. But like asking yourself like, why am I so upset about like this job, or why am I so upset that like I didn't do anything productive today?
That's a really, really, really good point. I like the way that you put that. And it's almost like, you know, it's like it's taking the ownership back and like not letting yourself play the victim to somebody else's like story, either a story of you or a story that you have of yourself. So you get to like take that power back, which is such an important thing. I want to quickly pause this interview and tell you about the Handel Group coaches that I've had the honor and privilege of bringing onto the Happiness Happens podcast. With every conversation and interview, I've learned something so impactful and so life-changing. Inner You Life is the online coaching course from Handel Group that gives you the tools to get yourself unstuck, wildly happy, and thriving where it matters most to you. Your relationship to yourself, career, love, body, money, time, and more. From wherever, whenever. Recommended by Hugh Jackman, Dr. Mark Hyman, Forrest Whitaker, Elena Brower, and hundreds more. Taught in MIT, Stanford School of Business, and 50 plus institutes of learning across the world. Visit inneryou.coach and use the code HappinessHappens at checkout for $75 off. Now, back to the episode. Okay, if we think about think about ourselves and all of the pressure that we put on ourselves, there's a lot of judgment that we can end up putting, you know, on ourselves and who we are and what we do. And, you know, even if you're in the coaching space, for example, or you're a service based business, you're an entrepreneur or whatever, and let's say, okay, we'll use this example because I'm launching something tomorrow. So let's just use this example.
Oh my
All
gosh.
the, yes, by the time this airs, it'll be like long launched,
Yeah.
but still, so, you know, launching something tomorrow. And, you know, as I was preparing for this launch and creating all the content and, you know, getting the plan together and all this stuff, I kept thinking about like, you know, is this good enough? Is what I did enough? Like, is there enough content in here? Is there enough value and all these different things? But then it kind of becomes like a judgment on my own self of like, you know, am I good enough to, and like, of course it's enough content. Like there's so much in there, you know what I mean? So it's like the answer is very obvious and it's like right in front of you, but then it's also like this preconceived way of like always judging ourselves for everything that we do and never finding that like ability to be proud of what you do because you're so concerned about like, was it enough? Was it good enough? Like so on, so on. So how could, you know, I said this is a very long way to get into my question, which is if you're feeling this way and you're feeling like you're always, you know, putting that judgment back on yourself, what's one way that you could stop doing that?
Yeah. First of all, I'm just glad, like, shout out to you launching something that's so awesome.
Thanks.
Being so open with your listeners, being so vulnerable too. Like, you're just awesome.
Oh, thank you so much. Because here's the thing, like it's I think one of the things is like, especially you could probably relate to this. Like people probably look at you are like, oh my God, she has everything figured out. It's just everything is all put together and so on, so on. But like, there is so much value with being like, hello, hi, I don't. Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we learn too, like, you know, the first time I launched something was like a half gong show because I didn't know what I was doing. Like I was like, sales page, what? But that was like a while, like it was the first one, you know what I mean? So it's different and you learn and then, you know what I mean? But I think it's also like having that transparency is so important because then people are like, she's just like everybody else, you know?
Yes. No. Oh my gosh. Yes. I cannot agree more. And I just think it's so awesome that because it just shows too. And I'll get to the question. I'm so sorry. It just shows too, like, how confident you are, like how comfortable you are by being so authentic. And I think too that's a big reason why Brene Brown is super big in the scene right now, and why Rachel Hollis. Like I read her first book. I haven't read her second. But it's basically her being like, hey, I did not have this figured out forever. I didn't have this figured out either. I kind of have this figured out, and people are raving over it.
Exactly. People are like, me too.
Yeah. Yes. Love it. And I love that you bring that. Anyway, I think it's so good for everybody here.
Brene Brown is like top like 5 favorite people. So I'm really so happy and grateful that you even brought her name into this podcast.
Oh my gosh. Biggest girl crush on her ever. She's amazing.
Right?
Anyway, the question. So
do you remember it?
Yes.
Okay.
I do.
A lot happened in between there.
It did. Yeah, so never feeling like you're proud or never feeling like something is enough, tying that to you. I think too, everybody has their own brand of not enough. Everybody has their own like version of that and how that shows up. And again, so like you mentioned, you're like, okay, was this enough content? Like, was this enough, like whatever? Did I do enough? I think when you get in that mode, because it becomes more of like an anxiety, right? Like,
yeah,
did I do enough? Did I do enough? I think it's important to like think, okay, well, what is enough? Like if I were to quantify it, like just even get to that point, because oftentimes you'll make yourself laugh. Like,
it's actually so true. Just as you're saying that right now, I'm like, yeah, it's more than enough. More than enough.
Yeah. And I was just coaching somebody yesterday who is an actress, and her tour is over because as we're recording this right now, there's a pandemic going on. I'm sure everybody's heard this happened.
If you haven't, where have you been?
Yeah. But yeah, her tour got canceled, and because she was on tour for so long, she moved back in with her family. And her like expectation was, or her thought was like, okay, if I don't move out by this time, I have failed. Like if I haven't gotten a job, if I haven't moved out, like another thing. And I was like, that was like her thing. Like, I failed, I didn't do enough. And I was like, girl, where is that date coming from? Because she's the one that came up with it, right? Like, nobody told her that. Her family member didn't tell her that. Like, the acting world didn't tell her that. Like, she created that.
So true.
Yeah, so just looking at like, okay, what would it be? And even getting like specific, again, it all comes to like, you got to do that from a place of curiosity. I think too, and I'm just going to get cheesy and corny, but I think it's a example everybody can relate to. Like, have you ever like looked up at like the stars or like seen like a waterfall and you're like, wow, nothing matters.
Oh my God. Yep. You're speaking my language.
Yeah. Like,
Have you
matters.
have you ever started to think about and like I can't go down this rabbit hole because I won't come out, but have you ever started to think about like, okay, the earth, how big the earth is, and then we're in this like universe, and then how big the universe is, and it's like then there's potentially more than one universe, and then you're like, what the fuck do we care? Like, honestly, it's kind of true. It's like, why is it such a big deal? Like, why is all of that fear so ingrained? And why do you have all of those different beliefs? Like, okay, it's conditioning. I totally get it. But when you put it in that perspective of like, there are so many, like, it's so much more than you'll ever know. You know what I mean? So it's like, do the thing. Just do the thing, because like, it's supposed to be fun. You know what I mean? It's supposed to be a fun ride.
Exactly. So like the pressure of it, like the pressure is all, and again, if you notice you're doing this, you have a human brain, like it's gonna happen. But if you notice you're doing it, and even if you notice like an hour after, you can still laugh about it and be like, dude, nothing really matters, but like, how awesome is it that like I care and I get to like launch this tomorrow? You know, like how awesome is that? Like, nothing that in the grand scheme of things, like, so what? That's one of my favorite questions to ask myself. Like, so what if it didn't do as well as I thought it would? Like, I'm still gonna keep going. And again, that goes back to
true.
Yeah, right. It goes back. It's like comforting how things don't matter. And if you get into a point where you're like anxious about things not mattering, you step back for a little bit. Like, you can put that pressure on yourself because things don't matter. Everything's good. But yeah, it also goes back to emotional resilience too, because again, like when we're afraid that something's not enough, I think too, we're afraid that if it's not enough, we'll be broken up with, or that we won't have friends, or that we won't get this career. But like not enough and getting stuck in that and being so afraid could prevent you from like arguing well with your partner. And then you break up, or it could prevent you from actually continuing even after you have failure after failure after failure with your career. So like the not enough thing can really cause you to feel, again, like not enough. But I would ask yourself, like, what does that even mean? Like, where does that even come from for you? How does your own brand of not enough look like? And then start like, yeah, hopefully I'm making sense. I'm kind of
this makes perfect. Yeah, I'm here for it. Mm-hmm. No, but it makes perfect sense, and it kind of like ties into this other idea. I'm gonna throw another concept into here because we haven't talked about enough concepts in this episode so far. But how does when you have all of these different realizations and you have all of these so you have your, let's say, feelings of like not enoughness, and or you have like a specific thing that you do all the time. That specific thing that you do all the time could be, a coping mechanism, right? Mm-hmm. So how would someone begin to get awareness around what they're doing to cope and how that relates to what they're trying to cope with? I don't even know if that was a clear question, but.
Yeah, no, it totally was.
Okay.
So like you're unhealthy, and I'm going to call it unhealthy because when I describe them, you will kind of know that it's not serving you. But when you have like a coping mechanism, like scrolling through social media, Netflixing, for some people it's emotional eating, mm-hmm. It's drinking, even if it's drinking like a glass of wine every night, whatever it is for you, like, it's probably something that you don't really want to do, first of all, that you have shame about to begin with, that you have like, that you're beating yourself up over.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever that may be, that behavior, I call it like buffering, like where you buffer, like those behaviors are buffering through your life in a way. It's your emotional buffer. And I call it that, but again, got that from Brooke Castillo. Gotta give her credit. But yeah, like I would just start looking at like, okay, like, well, how do I buffer? Like, because we buffer in order to avoid an emotion, right? Like, because again, like I said, like the tiff with my partner, like 5 concepts ago, but that like if I had like a small like tiff or like disagreement with him, like, do I get out my phone? Like, you'll start like noticing it. And like, even if it's you spend more hours like watching Netflix than you want people to know, like that's you buffering and trying to avoid something.
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I would just try to take notice of when you were doing those behaviors, those avoidance things, and then get curious about like, okay, why was I avoiding them? And for some people, they might be avoiding them so much that like it could even be like the small stressor of like just a traffic jam that just happened or whatever. And that's okay too. Because it just shows us like you can't, like you always can build your emotional resilience. Always. It doesn't matter where you fall on this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense, and I really like that. If you could give our audience one tip on how they can begin to change their thoughts and or manage their minds, what would it be?
Yeah, I'm gonna hit it home. I think it definitely awareness and curiosity. A lot of times, when I first start working with people, they'll be like, "Oh yeah, like I thought about like the questions you asked." I'm like, "Dude, you gotta write it down.
Do the work.
Mind will just keep going." Yeah, like write things down, talk things out. I'm a talker. If you guys didn't notice, so
Me too. We could be on here for hours.
I know, we have so much fun.
We would have so much fun.
But yeah, like if you have like a friend who is also like a talker or whatever it is, like talk things out. But it's just important to become aware of like just what you were thinking. And again, just that curiosity. I think that curiosity is often easy kind of to step into, because then we're like, oh, well, why am I thinking about this? And
Mm-hmm.
you could realize you're tying it to something that happened in middle school, or you could realize that you're believing like a limiting belief, whatever it is. So I would really like, from the bottom of my heart, you guys, just get curious, just look at your own minds. It's just doing that alone is going to do wonders for you.
Oh, that's such a good point. And, you know, like you're saying, like actually doing the work, like not just saying like, oh, I read them and like, that's really good and it resonates a lot, but it's like, okay, write it out or talk it out or, you know, go through it in a way that it kind of takes all of your thoughts and just like dumps them out onto paper. I love that.
Yes.
Love that.
Yeah. And it's just one last bit with it. It's so important because when you do that, like build that awareness or question things, you're like altering the like neural pathways that are in your brain. Because right now it's quick for you to think that there's no point, so quick that you don't even notice it, right? So it kind of stops that pathway and allows you to kind of almost like create a new one.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. How could, this is my last question for you, and this is a question that I ask all my guests when they come on the show. It is, how could someone begin to create a little more happiness in their day, every day, starting today?
Love it.
I love people's answers for this one. It's like always different. I love it.
I'm so excited. So have you heard of a Rampage of Gratitude?
No?
No? Okay. So Rampage of Gratitude is where you list like a bunch of things that you're grateful for and you just keep going. Sometimes that can be hard for people and like they can feel guilt trying to do that. But I always say like, try like a rampage of like passion, like, or like excitement, or motivation or whatever commitment, whatever you want it to be. And just like I do it before I like start my day, but I also like sometimes I get real unmotivated. I don't want to do a dang thing. So I'll do it then as well. But where you start thinking about like almost like your why and like what you're doing and thoughts that just make you feel like so passionate, and just start like listing those. It's going to make it easier for you to follow through on things. It's going to, again, like just lift your entire mood. So yeah, that would be my tip.
I love that. No one's ever said that before. That's really, really good. I love that. I love it. Where can our listeners find you? Because I know they'll want to learn more.
Yes. So I am on Facebook and on Instagram at Life Coach Jewel. Hopefully by the time this is released, I have a website for you guys, an email list. We've been working on it for a while. But yeah, that's just Life Coach, and then my name is Jewel.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on to the show today. This was so fun, and it was so informative.
Yeah, thank you so much. Like the best time. It was
Thank you so much for saying that. Okay, I take great pride in that, hoping people have fun when they come onto my podcast, because that's the whole point.
Yeah, I had a blast. And let me talk forever about all my favorite things. So super happy right now.
Oh my God, I absolutely love it. I'm so glad that you shared everything that you did, because this is so helpful for our listeners, and it gives a different perspective. It's a different way at looking at it's a different way of looking at things, and that, you know, that this is kind of the way that it is, and it's okay for your brain to be like that, and it's a thing that's going to happen, but here's like ways that you can actually manage it and, you know, shift your life in a significant way that you really want to.
Yes.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to this week's episode on the Happiness Happens podcast. You have to go back to the beginning, listen to this one again, take out all of the nuggets of information and actually implement them into your life. And I hope that you love this episode. If you did, definitely share it with someone. Let us know you're listening, and let us know what you loved. And until then, remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it. Thanks so much for being here today. I hope these words have brought you inspiration, insight, and a bit more happiness. Please leave a comment or a review if this episode resonates with you. I would be so grateful. Until next time, remember that happiness happens when you're least expecting it.